Welcome back to Dan91's Garage. Last week we clocked the TD04 so it's now in the correct orientation, so we can redo the hot side pipe work from the turbo to the intercooler. In doing this, we're also going to need to put a bead back on all the aluminium pipes we've cut down to make the pipe work in the first place. So I'll show you how to do that without using any special tools. Let's just dive straight into this, guys. See you in a sec.
We're going to start our hole here. So the back edge of it is 100mm from this sort of inner part of the splash guard. So we'll get a hole saw out, send a nice big hole here, another one this way, join them all up, and then we'll start poking pipes through. Okay, carefully, not so carefully. Perfect. There you go, perfect.
Okay, so we've already made up this side for the cold pipe. If we measure up from the end of the intercooler to the edge we've got to wrap round, it's about 170. And on this side, it's about 190. So we're 10mm off centre this way, which was intentional for when we were doing the short route hot pipe. But the other thing to remember is that's bang in the centre of where the bonnet stay brace goes to. So I would have had to make some sort of 10mm offset sort of L-shaped brackets for that, and then this wouldn't have quite lined up. So I think we dodged a bullet there, really, to be honest with you. So we're going to go with that. So what I now have is, because I've already got this cold pipe made up round here, and if I use the same rubber on this side, I know I've just got to make that pipe 20mm longer. So we've already done the hard work on that side. So now I can go and just basically copy the leg length to get round this side by adding 20mm. So this is the new hot side pipe, and this is obviously the existing cold side pipe. So what we do is, if we drop that on the top there, then we obviously need to set them so they're lying sort of directly on top of each other. So just get yourself a square, and you need to push that up, and then push that up as well. Put that on there, that's about right. So now if we mark off where the existing tube is, that minus 2 or 3mm, let me mark out from there 20 odd, because we needed to add 20. That's where we go to. And that's just a case of drawing around this, using this as a guide. Just use that to draw around. So there we are, shortened down, and I've trued it up on the disc sander. And it's nice and square in both directions. So that little machine is a godsend. They're not expensive, but to do this sort of stuff, it just saves so much time. The other thing, obviously, I've deburred it on the outside just by running it on the belt itself. You don't want to take too much of a chamfer off it, because I don't really want to make the end sharp or anything. So a little trick as well to deburr the inside. Obviously this is aluminium, so it's quite soft. What I like to use is just a Stanley blade, nice sharp new blade in it, and then just run it round with gentle pressure. It cuts off that burr without any effort, and you get a real nice clean line on the inside. So it's time to cut down the silicone hose, and what I like to do is obviously find where the end of the bend is and the beginning of the straight, and that's where the end of the alloy pipe's going to push up to. Then I add 35mm, because that gives you enough to get a decent thick band clamp on it, plus some of the hose left over outside of it, so it can't blow off as easily. So now, nice sharp Stanley blade. Run it next to the Jubilee clip. It's always a bit difficult to pierce it through the first time, but okay, so we've got the hot side pipe into the intercooler. That's pulled up as high as it can go, and we're also shoved in 35mm because there's a mark I made on the tube, and also we're nice and clear, there's about 6mm gap between this and the edge, where otherwise it's just going to eat into the tube. So if we go round and under here, so there's 30mm gap between the back of the towing eye and the silicone hose, and the bottom of it is about level with where the under trays are going to be. It could perhaps go a bit lower, but I don't really want to, so I've kept it level with the bottom of the front cross member. And we're going to run the pipe down from the turbo as close to that as we can, and then just with a straight piece of pipe in here. But there's 30mm here, and the further I can suck this pipe back towards it without it touching, the more room I've got in here as well for my air filter. So trimmed him up. Now we can see there's about 10 to 12mm gap here, which is as tight as I'd want it to get. Obviously this is going to move about a bit when the car's driving, and the engine's obviously going to be flapping a bit back and forward, so I wouldn't want it any tighter than that really. So yeah, not bad. So we're going to have to put a bead back on the end of this, otherwise the silicone hose is going to blow off. So you can buy bead rolling tools that are specifically for that job, but at the end of the day they're anywhere from 160 to 200 quid, and if you're not doing it all day long, then probably not worth the investment. So you've probably seen this before, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but these are channel lock 909 crimping pliers for electrical connectors, and there's a section of it there that obviously has, I call it the tooth, and that is for obviously the non-insulated connectors, but when you clamp it together, you can see it forms a pretty nice shape that's almost sort of the cross section of a bead roll. So what you do is obviously put the tooth on the inside, because that's the one that's going to push up on the material, and this is 1.8mm thick alley. So what you do, it's quite simple, drop it in right to the end, make sure you get it straight, so you don't want to be on the piss this way or on the piss that way, or it goes a bit funny. So get it straight, and then just gently squeeze down till you sort of feel it stop. And then what happens is that pushes up this tiny little bead here from the inside in one small section. You carry on going all the way around, and then you end up with a ridge on the outside. So I'll carry on doing that with the tooth on the inside. So simply line it up next to the one you've just done. Keep it straight. A little bit of a squeeze. Round again. A little bit of a squeeze. And we'll keep going around like this. And hopefully you can already see there, we're starting to form a nice ridge. I'll carry on doing this, and I'll show you the difference, because if you go round once, you get a certain height, and then if you go round again, you'll get an increase in height as well, depending on what you think you need. So I'm going to carry on with this, and I'll show you the two different versions. So that's the bead fully crimped round now. It's obviously not as smooth as a rolled one, but it's never going to be, considering you're doing it basically 6mm at a time with a set of crimping pliers. But the results are perfectly acceptable. It's gone from 51mm outside diameter to 52.5, so we've added on an extra 1.5mm, or sort of 3/4 either side. And this is what happens when you go around it twice. The marks are a bit more obvious and a bit more defined, but there's no cracking or tearing or splitting of the material. There's no bits falling off on the inside, although you can feel the edges obviously where the tooth's bitten into it, but it's a perfectly acceptable bead roll. And we're up to 53.5, perhaps a bit bigger, depending on where you measure it. So if you go around twice, it gets a bit uglier, but it gets a bit more defined. And being as you're going to have the silicone hose over this and it clamped down, it really isn't going to be visible to anyone. So this was my practice piece of tube. I'll probably go around them all twice, but I'll start off with one on each end and we'll go from there. And the good thing about these channel locks is they've got quite long handles on them as well, so they're actually quite easy to squeeze. They give you a good amount of leverage, and there's no, I've done 5 or 6 pipes so far, which isn't a huge amount, but there's absolutely no slop in this mechanism at all. So that tells me at least I might be able to still use these for electrical connectors when I'm done, rather than just nailing another pair. But I think these are like 25 quid, so compare that to 150 quid for a tool that will make you an acceptable bead roll. I mean, I'll take this one all day long. Second bead done. No sharp edges. Okay then, so I've got a 48mm 90-degree silicon bend on here. It's one of those sizes where the legs aren't worth cutting down to actually put a piece of alloy pipe in, and plus I'm going to need a bit of flexibility in the system when the engine rocks, so I'm going to leave that as it is. And then if we look through here, it's almost lined up with the other pipe over here. It's not quite parallel to it, but I'm going to cut myself up a short piece of alloy pipe to go between the two, and I'm sure that there'll be enough flexibility in them. I mean, they're silicone hoses for God's sake, so they should be able to pull up to that. The other option is to obviously clock the turbo a lot more, but then I run out of room on the actuator. So we have a quick look under here. Chuck one of the clamps on for the time being, and I've positioned it so the access to the bolt is available when the bumper's going to be on, because the last thing you want is your nut to tighten anything up round here, and then something happens while you're out driving, you have to take your whole car apart just to put this coupler back on. So that's something to think about, your position for access to the clamp fasteners. So as we can see under here, this is the end of the 90 coming round. That's the pipe from the turbo. So I know roughly I need 35-ish mil, so we'll leave it, yeah, 35-ish mil there. And if we come around this side, I reckon I'll chop it off at about 190. So the universal kit did come with a couple of 180-degree bends. Unfortunately, the distance between these pipes isn't wide enough to actually go round the side where I've had to make it up out of two 90s. This would have been a nicer flow, but it just simply isn't a large enough pitch between these tubes. What I'm going to do is, miraculously, having already measured this up off camera, there is about 190mm of straight here as well. So I did want 200, but basically these pipes, I either chop up a good straight or I chop up a useless pipe and have it slightly shorter than I dreamed of. So we're going with this at 190, and then that'll make up our nice short little joiner. Finish off the hot side. Okie dokie, so that's me 190mm bit of straight pipe. I've marked up how much overlap I need for this pipe, so that comes to the end of the tube, and that's where I need to be on this one. So I'll just offer them up under here, with that one there, and the other mark I've got lined up with the Jubilee clip. That's where I'm going to chop off the other tube. That piece should slot in there lovely, and that'll be the hot side done. So there we go, 48mm 90-degree silicon. Obviously with silicon hoses you can squeeze them over 3mm bigger tubes and squash them down to 3mm smaller tubes, but I prefer to sort of stretch them over because I just think it's easier to seal them that way. So 48mm, same as the turbo outlet. Then we're stretched up to a 51 for this straight piece of alloy that goes out. And if you have a quick look underneath, that's the other end of the 48mm, joined up to our straight pipe, then to our 90 round. And what I've done is I've cut this short enough so when I put the clamp on, the clamp band is lined up with the back of the towing eye, sort of triangulation piece here. So if this flaps around and sort of bashes forwards and backwards or anything, the only thing rattling against sort of this piece of the bodywork is going to be the metal clamp, which I can replace, rather than eating through the silicon or the alloy, which won't last 5 minutes really. So that's cool. And also access to the nut so I can actually tighten it up. Then obviously we come round. It's actually not a bad guess, that hole in the side of it. So don't think I could have actually done it better if I'd have done the pipe and then cut it afterwards rather than just sort of sending it. But yeah, that worked out okay for once, which was cool. And then we come around to the front and obviously into the intercooler there. So, but we obviously need to put the bumper back on and trim that out now, because now the pipe route is this way rather than down through the top where the short route was. So I'm not going to show you how to do that, because you've hopefully seen the other video where I've already chopped up the rest of the bumper to fit. So one little notch out here, then that's all done. Then we can finish off this side, put the half I've made back on for the cold side, and then go up and then up to the throttle body. So we'll crack on with that, I guess. My name's Dan, this is Dan91's Garage. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode.